Welcome back to some Hexarchy. I dug up my old microphone, hopefully getting some better audio quality out of it. And last night, I ran a game that was supposed to be simple and quick, but I ran into WaterD in the queue, so this test of a more dynamic editing style ended up being a bit more of a intense culture rush than I expected. Let's get right into it. This game, I got a great but not amazing start. 2 economic resources, a military resource, and 1 strategic one. But they're just spread out far enough that I need to get a unit out to turn 1 to culture claim both the stone and the holy site. My opening hand doesn't have a unit in it, so I'm all again looking for one. I'm able to get a pasture out on the food and also drop the warrior, although I think it might be a mistake as I could have burned the warrior and gotten an archer out instead. 50-50 because that little warrior ends up taking a city with a little bit of help, but I think the archer might have been a better play in most games. There's a slight chance I can get the turn 2 pyramids here to get the double stone. Never mind. Okay, we know where WaterD is. The settler is the most important thing that happens on turn 2. Its large sightline reveals not only is there a wall between me and Egypt, so there's no way I'm going to be able to militarily shut down the pyramids advantage, but also Rome and Arabia are right there. I'm probably going to end up stuck in a war with one or both of them. It also shows that my starting position's a bit better than I thought, with extra horses, luxuries, and iron up north. And on to turn 3. France manages to build the statue of Zeus right out from under me, and Arabia's scout blocks my food pasture. I look at the deck and notice that I've got both pasture and lumber mill in the last 4 cards. I draw through all of them and manage to put down the fishing hut, the pasture, and the lumber mill, getting a huge economic advantage going early game. But because I have to burn both Mobilize and Warrior to make this happen, I don't end up killing the scout and freeing up the food pasture until turn 7, which hurts a lot. At the start of turn 4, Egypt grabs the Temple of Diana. I'm now mentally just playing for second place, thinking I'm not going to be able to catch up to the pyramids advantage. Noting how there's no good options for people to sneak attack me out of the fog of war, I go for a pure economic turn. I managed to turn 11 hammers and a giant pile of gold into another pasture, a harbor, a mine, a second forge, and finally getting my first library online. There's no way I could have known this during the game, but on turn 5, Egypt had just settled Thebes beyond a block of difficult terrain, cutting the transport cost between us in half. Marble went from 7 gold each to now there's 4 of them sitting on the market for only 3 gold a pop. I draw Mysticism and run all the way down the tech tree and drop the Hagia Sophia. Talking with WaterD after the game, they thought this was the game-winning play, stealing the most important cultural wonder from them 1 turn before they were ready to build it themselves. This next draw was really risky. Although I got masonry to defend with, both Rome's warrior and Medina are within striking distance of Moscow. If a mobilized charge comes through, I simply lose the game. I ended up not building a warrior this turn, which I think was a mistake. I got too focused on my long-term plan of building at least 1 monastery before swapping to secularism, and that got buried on the bottom of the deck, and I was not looking forward to the shuffle. I did get 2 wonders out of it this turn, so the risk paid off, but I wouldn't recommend it in the future. If I had to replay this turn, I'd probably burn either the Great Lighthouse or Hanging Gardens, and use the hammers saved from that to go up into metalworking, dropping a defensive swordsman in Moscow. It worked out this time, but it was a pretty big risk without knowing how good an aggressive Rome was. And finally on turn 7, we have some real conflict happening. Arabia has a unit directly threatening Moscow, 100% lose the game unless I find something, but I've got my long-term game plan, the monastery in the opening hand, so I don't want to mulligan. I end up using the economic engine I've built, along with building a harbor on the new expansion, in order to draw 15 cards to find both masonry and horseback riding. Apparently the play was putting a cavalry with royal guard to defend Moscow, and sending a knight after Old Orleans. I do miss a tactic at the end of the turn. I'm too focused on the long-term game plan of culture, so I build a monument to push that further. When if I had burned it, I would have been able to afford the charge and take Orleans on the 1-turn wonder. Settler immediately captures the city without even the statue of Zeus. Didn't get access to the charge. I'm feeling pretty confident going into turn 8. Neither Arabia nor France built units to preempt the counter push, so I'm okay slowly pushing back as a stalling tactic to build up more culture. I'm able to put out another monastery and build WaterD, and now I'm looking for an opportunity to swap into secularism to get the huge culture bomb that craftsmanship offers. I do give Arabia an opportunity to sneak attacks with barracks over to Novgorod, but based on the level of play I've seen so far, I don't expect them to pull it off. Well, I didn't notice it during the game, but it turned out that Arabia was a bot the entire time. The Strength Scout should have been a giveaway, but the way it was alternating between food sources for a forage threw me off. Turn 9 isn't my best work. Although the warrior does capture Orleans, I'm surprised that France didn't defend it. I get distracted by the two-front war, mostly building military units and thinning the deck this turn. I forget half of my game plan when this is happening. The whole point was to save education for the end, to get an extra use out of both Holy Warrior and Monastery for the culture, before setting up secularism. However, I forget to actually use secularism, taking the civic and just storing it for the next turn. This is the first time I think I ran out of time this entire game, actually. Drawing into the new stuff. Ooh, even with the East India Company, I took over first place? Going into this last turn, I see 97 victory points on the board and assume this is going to be the end of the game. I've got a couple of things I'm worrying about. I have to stop sneak attacks ruining the game for me. Both Arabia has a potential barracks drop, and if Egypt's swordsman claims the tile and drops a barracks, Novgorod is also under threat. So I end up dropping a musketman to defect Novgorod. Because of the way that Egypt's been so thoroughly isolated, they can only get a single unit out of that barracks. Even a double-strength Berserker musketman won't be able to get through Novgorod. Rome, because they're sitting on a tile of a pasture, they can't do a claim barracks push, leaving only the one spot from Arabia open, and based on the way that Arabia's been playing, I wasn't able to evaluate that they were a bot mid-game, but I didn't believe they'd be able to pull off the sneak attack. I finally get the gigantic craftsmanship drop happening right here for a huge 23 culture, and drop the castle to guarantee getting over 100 points. Even if I lose a city this turn, the game will end. Looking at the end of game screen, this ended up being a really interesting spawn. Paris and Egypt were fighting from basically turn 2 when France built the statue of Zeus, and France's second expansion, Lyon, is only 2 spaces away from Egypt's first expansion. Rome had access to the entire coastline. Normally the players on the outsides of the map, in this case France and Rome, have really good options to play defensively, having a safe border with the ocean. However, it seems like neither of them were able to push out an industrial win, mostly because France got stuck fighting Egypt, although I don't know what happened with Rome. I'm just still quite surprised I was able to out-industry a turn 1 pyramids. The huge number of resources that the pyramids bring in is basically a free wonder every single turn for the entire game. And with that, that was a fun game to play, and an excellent set to WaterD. Good games, everyone. $12, 13 tiles of culture on that last turn from the craftsmanship. Ooh, that felt good. Alright. Good game, WaterD.